what's up, y'all? This is your girl, Diamond. I am here with the amazing Raquel Willis. If you don't know who she is, she is, which you should, an activist, a writer, and currently she is the director of communications for Miss Foundation for Women, which was founded in 1973, and it was founded by a group of women, but most notable is Gloria Steinem. When I heard that you had got the position, I was like, oh my God, this is perfect for Raquel because, they have this long history. And before we get into that, I kind of want to start off with something light. Some people might think maybe superficial, but it's important to us because all the shit about Black women is political. I want to talk about hair. So recently, you have been donning, well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you. I know you're like, let's get down to business, honey.
welcome. Thank you for coming and being a part of Marsha's Play. You have been rocking this fro lately that I'm really fucking feeling, especially when I saw you at the protest talking about Black trans power. And hair is always political for Black women, and for me, it just seeing you talk your shit and being in your groove, it was with your fro, it just was like, oh shit, this is, yes, I got so hyped when I watched it. It was so amazing. Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with your hair through the lens of your transness?
Yeah, so it's so funny that, we're talking about hair, and obviously, I got my little gilda on, honey.
Yes, whip it up.
As our mutual friend Aria Saeed out in San Francisco calls it a gilda.
Yeah.
My hair journey has been so tied to my gender journey, of course. So I have my natural hair out all throughout quarantine. So I had to do a photo shoot like a week ago, and so they, it was a wig moment. So they, braided my stuff down, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll rock a wig for a little minute while it's like down because I can't braid my own hair. That's just not a skill that I think a lot of the girls that I know that we had a chance to like lean into growing up, right? Because I was so reserved, I think, in a lot of ways for like little cisgender girls, right? And so I didn't get that skill, unfortunately. Maybe one day. I love my natural hair. Like, I don't think I will ever perm it or process it ever again. I also just am not even interested in like coloring it. Like, I don't, when I wear my natural hair out, like, I don't want it really to be affected in any way. And I had a natural hairstyle in high school. So this was like mid to late to the first decade of the 2000s, and having natural hair back then was not cute, y'all. Like, I got jonesed on. I got bullied for having this big old afro at that point. So I remember before everyone was like, "Oh, I love my natural hair," like back to Black Power. Like, no, ma'am. We didn't have like really products like that like 10 or so years ago.
You didn't have no damn tutorials that you could look up on YouTube.
No, child, I was mixing, I was up in there cooking up something like with pomades and stuff, so much petroleum, all these like ingredients that we just didn't really talk about being not so great for your hair, being dry, and using that like pink sheen.
Yeah, pink lotion,
yes, the lotion too. And it was like, it always left this like ashy cast on my hair. But it just was what we had. And so I remember actually telling my dad when I was about 12 or so that I didn't want to get my hair cut anymore. And part of it was like, I really just wanted my hair to be long in some way. I hated having to cut it and having that like stereotypical like Black boy cut, because like that just didn't feel right to me. But I also wanted to bypass the barbershop because that was a space that just felt hella uncomfortable to me.
Mm. I remember
Yeah.
when I was younger and used to go to the barber shop, they used to have the most inappropriate misogynistic conversations. And I didn't have that kind of that analysis, but it did feel uncomfortable. Like, y'all are talking about my mother, y'all are talking about my aunties, y'all are talking about women in my family, y'all are talking about black girls in a way that feels really, even at the time when, you know, I was a young little boy. I think I transitioned early, so this is probably like 12, and I would be like, these conversations are weird. Wait till I go home and tell my mama. And I would tell my mama, and she would go up there, y'all don't need to be having these conversations in front of these young little boys.
Oh
Y'all
my
teaching us
God.
the wrong way.
Yeah, and see, I felt like if I even said anything about being uncomfortable, it would implicate me too much. Because they all knew my dad, so it was like I would be going with my dad, and it just be like also just watching my dad, perform masculinity in a way was also eye opening to me because I was like, what is this? What is this? Like, do you realize like you're playing a role right now? Like, you got a script too that you're following. It's not just me. It's like all of y'all.
Really?
Yeah, I vividly remember seeing the difference in how boys and girls were treated. And I remember feeling like so out of touch with it. Like I could just like never catch up to being what I was supposed to be by everyone else's standards. Right. And I didn't have language for it, obviously. Like, who did? But I knew something was off. I was like, well, I don't know how to put this in words.
Right.
And I'm afraid to.
Right. Especially in that time. So how did you... So for me, I remember the YouTube craze started to happen with the natural hair thing. And it was probably like, I think I cut all of my hair off. I did a big chop in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like in the beginning, that really, when it was beginning to boom on YouTube and people were, I remember how I was I couldn't feel, like if I even felt like a ripple of a nap or a curl, I was immediately putting the creamy crack on there. It was just from the time, it was just a part of, especially coming from the background. I came from a family that, they're colorists, that was deep embedded in colorism and in what good hair. I come from family from the South, so it was very good hair, bad hair, and you knew exactly what they were talking about when they said good hair, and you knew exactly what they were talking about when they said bad hair. And so getting a relaxer was literally embedded in all the cis women. If you're gonna be a girl, relaxer is how to go. That's exactly what it was. And so once I started growing my hair out when I was younger, thinking of not getting a relaxer was almost thinking about similar to thinking like not bathing. Like it would be so out of character that I'm like, you got to have a relaxer. So breaking that mold for myself and accepting my own hair was literally a journey for me. How did you come about, accepting your hair as is in its natural state?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So when I got to my senior year of high school, I had like gotten my braces off. I was like, I'm gonna just do it all. I'm gonna just change it all up, and I cut my hair off. And I really felt like cutting my hair off was like part of a time period where I was trying to figure out how I was gonna blend in enough to survive. And I remember, like getting a lot of compliments for cutting my hair off. Like there was so much that I didn't register as anti-blackness then, but just like a lot of anti-blackness around the natural texture.
Right.
And even when I was wearing my hair natural in high school, like I had to wear it a particular way. Like my dad was like, and my grandma was like, this gotta be neat It's got to be the right shape. You're going to have to pick it out and pat it down into the right shape every day. Like, there wasn't this, like, let your natural curl pattern roll out, right? So I was really rocking it as if I was living in the 70s, which was, it was cute for what it was. And then when I when I got to college, I started growing it out more. I finally was an adult, so I was like playing around more with like mohawks and high top fades and almost like what you rocking right now. It looked cute. And different colors. So I was like doing like, I think I did like a magenta. It was like a bright red, almost like Rihanna red.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like a little fade up into that color. I did like a purple, blue kind of moment when I was like, to really start to figure out my gender. And then I started growing my hair out natural my senior year of college back in like 2012, 2013. And I was growing it out with the purpose to perm it.
Mm. Yeah.
So, because I was like, well, I got to figure out how I'm going to best survive. And, the passability conversation was real. I mean, it still is real for a lot of the girls. And so I was like, well, I got to relax my hair. So it took me a while to get back to the natural. It's really been the last like 3 or 4 years that I've really been back on my full natural stuff. I wear protective hairstyles now. Like, I really wish I had my like braids. But obviously with COVID-19, like, whatever I can do to not be under somebody's breath, I'm trying to do that. But yeah, I mean, I love my natural hair. Even now, like, the last few days I've been like, okay, girl, like, I'm ready to bring her back out. But I always miss it. I'm always like, even when I have my natural hair out, I'm missing the Gilda moment. And it's like, I have to make a choice and then live in it for a little bit and then come back around.
Yeah, it's always like that for me. Where I switch, when I'm with my natural, it's like, okay, I'm feeling, however I'm feeling this moment. And then I'm like, oh, I want some long hair. And I want to feel that wind blowing and da-da-da-da-da. And I kind of go back and forth too. So I totally understand that. So let's talk about Miss. So, being the director of communications, they have a history of, just really supporting grassroots women's organizations. So, putting a trans woman in this position, to me, in this era, is a power move for me, to me, for them to do it. How important, can you talk about the significance of being in this position at this organization that has a legacy, like almost 50-year-old women's org?
Yeah, it is a big deal. I think I'm still realizing that more and more every day. So when I think about the Miss Foundation, I think about it as if it really grew up and evolved alongside the feminist movement.
Absolutely.
Particularly, the second wave and beyond. And so, there's no running away from the history, honey. It was founded by mostly white women. And it has been evolving, I think, alongside the rest of society in terms of figuring out how to meet the moment of feminism, of women's power. And really, I believe, there's a more expansive gender justice conversation to have beyond, obviously, these binaries. And so that's some of the work I hope to continue to massage in that space. But I think that it's so important for us to really have more say and more presence and more power in spaces where the capital is moving and flowing. And, obviously I know how precarious capitalism is. I know how devastating its history, particularly for Black folks around the world, but particularly how it perpetuates so many other systems of oppression.
Right.
And I realized that, that is the system, the economic system we have, right, currently. And so while we're figuring out new alternatives beyond it, or to transcend it, we also have to figure out how we're going to survive within it. And so it's been important for me to really start having more of an analysis on building economic power, particularly for Black trans folks.
Right.
Because I really think that is one of our biggest shots in shifting a lot of conditions. We're seeing it every day. Our people are like, bump these like folks who are the power brokers in the LGBTQ plus community, bump these like Black cis folks who don't really give a fuck about us.
Right.
We're going to find our own ways. And so we're seeing success with like crowdfunding, obviously groups like Glitz Inc. and House of Tulip are doing powerful things. Y'all are doing powerful things down there in Dallas, with Black trans advocacy. And so it's important, I think, also as we look at this philanthropic space, that our voices are in the room. And not just in the room, but that we are leading the narrative building work. Like, what is the story that goes along with an intersectional feminist strategy? And that analysis is not going to exist without us. Right. When people talk about a Black, queer, intersectional, and feminist lens, that doesn't necessarily tell me that you have particularly a Black trans feminism lens coupling with that.
Right.
And so that's really important for me. And so I'm also just doing a lot of thought leadership work with other Black trans women, like Toni Michelle Williams is very interested in us continuing to build out Black trans feminist frameworks. Right. With Aria Saeed, of course, our dear friend, and so many other folks, right? Like, I feel like the work you do is a part of this emerging Black trans feminist canon, right? It's a part of, our way forward. And so whatever I can do in whatever space I'm in to build containers for us to discuss, elevate, incubate our solutions, that's what I want to do. And I appreciate Ms. because it has been, particularly in the leadership of our current CEO and president, Teresa C. Younger, made an intentional strategic pivot to centering women and girls of color. Like, so that is built into our org strategy. Right. And in that, I'm already seeing, a presence around trans feminist ideologies and ways of thinking. Like, recently we funded a couple of different Black trans groups, including Solutions Not Punishments Collaborative, including Black Trans Media, in addition to other women and girls-led organizations. And so I think what's powerful about Ms., not to go on too long, but what's powerful about Ms. is that I see it really as like a hub, the glue between so many different movements. And so what are the things that Black trans leaders can learn from the work of Indigenous folks on the ground, right, which we also fund, or expanding the reproductive justice conversation, which we also fund, or expanding the conversation on defunding and abolition, which we also fund. And so there's so many connections, immigration work, that we, I think, as a foundation can be at the center of bringing together. I know, that was a lot. I just went.
No. That's what I like. When you talk about pivoting, one of another amazing thing that is a part of your particular legacy. I hate talking about legacy like you old. You ain't old, but you're making moves and you're doing things that are changing the culture. And so one of those things is that you were one of the first to me that I know of, trans executive editors of a magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Of Out magazine. So for me, that move to me was also a great pivot for that organization. And I couldn't, the thing, of course, that was the big, huge thing was when you put all those trans feminine leaders of the movement on the page with, when we talk about Charlene Carruthers, Barbara Smith, that Miss Majors, and Tourmaline. Is that how you say her name? Tourmaline?
Yeah, Tourmaline.
When I saw that, I was like, this is exactly what I expected from Raquel. Like when you launched it, because you've always been so generous and so just really intentional about the work that you put out. And so seeing you do that, I'm telling you, I was sitting on my little desk and was like, yes! That was a fucking moment. Because like, why else would they hire you in this position if they weren't gonna let you do this? You see what I'm saying? So I was like, oh my God, it was amazing. So can you tell me, it was a powerful moment for me. So can you tell me how that came about, you doing that there?
Yeah, I think first, like for me, I think on the outside, maybe to other folks, the different types of work I've done throughout my career. Again, I'm really still so young, but the types of work that I've done throughout my career may look disconnected, but it isn't to me. I feel like I've always been invested in cultural organizing and cultural building. Whether that's in nonprofit communications or in a traditional journalism lane. And so that's always been important to me. So when I got to Out, it was important for me to bring all of those lessons that I had learned on the ground, all of those folks that I had met on the ground, all of those values that I had deepened on the ground, with so much thanks to a lot of the Black trans folks, but particularly Black trans women in the different circles I've been in, with me, because the win isn't really for me. At the end of the day, like, it's great to be a first, I guess. Like, I'm grateful, I think, for those opportunities, but it's not lost on me that with those opportunities, it's also a statement of the amount of boxes that I've had to check off to even make it to that point. And for me, it's always about leaving the door open for the next person or girl that comes through to not have to check off those boxes. Like, I don't want the next person to have to look like me, think like me necessarily, speak like me, have had the same access that I've had, because that's not actually the work. The work is actually breaking down those boundaries and barriers. Yeah. So Out, like, I was ready to be clear. Queerness, transness is Black. It's disabled. It's full of womanish inclinations. It's full of femininity. It's full of gender nonconformity. It's non-binary. It's so many different things that we just were not seeing in that space.
On a queer magazine, because before it was very cis white, and I had never seen this much Blackness being showcased.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was powerful. It was also important to continue to deepen that. Like, by the time we got to the end of the year, for me, it was always, I knew that I wanted to figure out how to have some kind of like large showcase of activists and organizers on the ground. And the thing that sucks, of course, is like, every conversation I was having, I was like trying to like make that happen. And then, of course, you get hit with the need and the desire of balance from like advertisers and all types of folks. But I knew with the Out 100, which is, each year this like huge showcase of the most powerful, influential, quote unquote, queer and trans people, as decided typically by a very small group of folks with typically very small lenses, that I wanted to like really do a showcase on a different way of looking at influence. You know, the folks who influence me the most are Black trans folks. The folks who influence the culture, who influence this movement, who built this movement, are Black trans and gender nonconforming folks. And each year, there is not enough acknowledgement of the influence of the folks moving work on the ground, but also the folks that we lose. Yep. And so with the Trans Obituaries Project, it was kind of upending that idea of what impact means. And I am so deeply impacted every time we lose another Black trans person, Black trans woman. I mean, we lost 3 in the last few days that we know of, you know? And so I really wanted to figure out how to give something to some of the souls that we lost in 2019 in the form of the obituaries that they always deserved. Mm-hmm. And then also use that to go into detail about the story of Layleen Polanco extravaganza, and how she, in her death, has rallied a community, rallied her family to fight for Black trans liberation. And literally, the impact of that fight has shifted legislation here in New York. You know, literally the movement to halt solitary confinement was emboldened by what happened to Layleen.
And on a personal level, for me, as the executive director of the org that I'm in, we have been trying to get funded a bailout initiative to get trans women out of jail here in Houston, here in Texas, because you know, we have incidents like Layleen and D. Farmer, who are in those same kind of situations here. And recently, because of her case, we got funded to be able to get trans women out of jail. We just launched the initiative. And so, yes, it definitely has impacted from New York all the way down to here.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, there's so much devastation, I think, in our communities. And I think that we don't have to just live in the tragedy. Right. Like, we can continue to figure out ways to make the lessons we unfortunately learn mean something greater. Right. And that's really what I wanted to do with that work and with other work, right? And I think there's so many folks who do that. You do that day in and day out. So yeah, so I mean, and that's really how I look at all of my work, right? Like it's really all the same work. At the core for me is always centering Black trans folks. And then if things can reverberate out to other groups, great. You know,
which they usually do.
Which it does, yeah.
So speaking of your other work, so let's go further back and out. Let's talk about Transgender Law Center. So when you were the national organizer there, you started a group. You launched a project called Black Trans Circles. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And it's about building leadership in trans women in the South and the Midwest, and to create kind of community solutions in prevention, healing, resilience, and, you know, specific responses to violence. And so that what you just said is a perfect segue into that, because I'm all about, because what I'm kind of annoyed in seeing, I don't want to say annoyed, but I'm annoyed in seeing that people are more moved when we are being beat, raped, and killed to actually sow seeds into us, give us finances, give us funding. When we are out here trying to do preventative programming and we call for people to fund us, it's kind of like nobody is moving. But as soon as somebody dies, oh, where can I donate? And so for me, this was a powerful legacy of yours at the Transgender Law Center, to have something like Black Trans Circles to build that kind of leadership, so we can prevent us from dying, and we can heal us, and we can talk about and build the infrastructure to make us thrive. So can you talk about that program?
Yeah. So when I got to TLC, I actually came in a communications associate role. So I wasn't initially in a national organizing role, which I don't know if a lot of people outside of that space know. And then it just became apparent, I think, the need for more substantial work happening around trans folks of color, and particularly Black trans folks. Now, I also noticed, while I was there, and this was like before Ola had started his project, because we were both in completely different departments before we came into the program scene. And I have to always give it up to Ola Osaze for starting BLMP, the Black LGBTQ plus Migrant Project, and really leading the charge in a way for specific programming around being Black and trans. And I mean, as much as everyone talks about how we need to be supporting and protecting Black trans folks right now, it was a completely different story just a few years ago.
Just a few years ago.
A year ago, to be honest. 2 months ago. So it was really a struggle to make the case for what we needed as Black trans people. And so when I started developing Black Trans Circles, I knew I wanted to figure out how to alleviate the wreckage that is left in communities when a Black trans woman is killed. And there's a lot of different types of wreckage. There's the wreckage of the horrible, conscience of cis folks who are not invested in making action around ending the epidemic of violence.
Right.
There's the wreckage of the folks who have the power and the resources to actually move, but they sit on their asses and don't actually do anything to keep us alive. And then there's the wreckage that most of these other groups don't even consider, of our resolve and our will to continue as Black trans people. And it was that space that I really wanted to see, okay, well, what are the things that can support these areas? We need more Black trans leaders to be empowered. We need an analysis of healing justice to understand the trauma that we already face as Black trans folks that is deepened when this violence happens. But then we also need to be building networks amongst each other so that we can continue to incubate solutions.
Right.
And so we started in New Orleans because in 2017, that was essentially ground zero for violence. And it looks like, unfortunately, again, it is.
Was that the year that China Gibson passed?
Right.
Yeah.
China Gibson, Jaquarius Holland.
Right.
And Sierra McElveen.
Right.
In Louisiana, and it was within weeks of each other.
Right.
And now, right. And now, right, it's now Texas, Dallas, and it's weird, Baton Rouge are neck and neck this year. Mm-hmm. We just learned about Keisha Hardy in Baton Rouge, who is the third woman in Louisiana literally in about a month. And then, of course, all of the murders that have been happening, particularly in Dallas.
Right.
And so it was important to go to those specific areas to see how to bolster those efforts. Now, I knew I didn't want to go in working for this national organization saying that I had the answers. I don't have the answers. y'all have even as a Black trans woman, I don't have the answers. I'm not from New Orleans. I'm not from Louisiana. I'm from Georgia. I'm a Southern woman, but it's a completely different context. And nobody knows better than the people who are actually like residents there. But it was about us having these resources that we could at least build a space for folks to come together to delve into political education. What are these systems of oppression plaguing us? Because I believe political education is so key. But also, what are the ways that people are figuring out how to survive, and how can we share those ways with each other? Yeah. And then what are the projects y'all are working on currently that y'all could be supporting each other better on? And so out of that space, of course, like House of Tulip now, a couple of things went into making House of Tulip the success that it is right now, but part of it was some of those initial connections happening with folks like Mariah Moore and Milan Nicole Sherry.
Right.
And also supporting like Wendy Cooper, another local advocate in New Orleans.
Legend in New Orleans.
Legend, yes, who was leading the Cans Can't Stand campaign. And so that space in a way brought, I think, more of the girls into her orbit. So it was, and also just a chance for folks to break bread with each other, to love on each other. Yeah. If there was a hard conversation that one of the girls need to have with somebody else, they could have it in that safe space, and then go out and do the work once that weekend summit was over. Mm. And so I was so grateful to be able to found it and build the initial framework for it with a Soros Equality Fellowship, and then be able to really gift it, in a sense, to some of the other powerful Black organizers who made the later iterations possible. Mickey Bradford in Atlanta, we go way back, and of course Mariah Moore and Kayla Gore now. So it lives on at TLC.
Yeah, I think it was with their trans agenda that I was introduced to at Creating Change. I could hear your voice kept coming up, and they were talking about how the work that you was doing in New Orleans really led to the shift in culture at TLC in regards to what they were focusing on. And so I think that's beautiful work. I think that we all are doing that culture shifting work. And, I just wanted to kind of highlight that. You started off, before that, as a writer. And you still are a writer. But, that was your pathway into, correct me if I'm wrong, into movement work, writing, right?
Well, kind of. It's a complicated story. So yeah, before I went to TLC, I was working in the media industry, but I was working on things that were completely unrelated in general. So when I graduated from college, I actually freelanced for a bit. It was like kind of difficult to find a job because I was a Black trans woman who, I had a college degree, but I had no connections.
Right.
And so I freelanced for a bit.
Hey, before you move from that is really important. People, that goes over people's heads so much. Yeah. Just having a degree, just having all these things, we have to have connections. And the people, when we go out here and we try to make stuff happen, if we don't have the connections, we don't have them, and they're not going to happen. So that's a part of the allyship. Like, help us make connections. So if you are listening to this and you have connections and you see Black trans women out here trying to do the work, because I know as an executive director, it is some things I'm like, I didn't even have this connection to make this happen. Like you're asking me why I didn't do this, why I didn't do that, and it's like I didn't have the connection. I couldn't get the invite. I couldn't get the invite to this foundation special invite only, or to do the work that I know is important over here. We didn't have a connection. So it's really, really important that those connections are important. And if you have them, help us make them.
Yeah, it's true. And so I didn't have professional connections, but I also was leaving an environment where I was the only openly Black trans woman on campus. I did not know another Black trans woman who was open about her identity really before I moved to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
At like 23, 24. You know, so I also just did not have community connections. So I didn't even look at the nonprofit world as an option until I made it to Atlanta. And so I worked at this small newspaper where I actually was like Stylz for like about a year and a half almost. Was not out as queer, was not out as trans, and was working in a very small town, a conservative town. I mean, this was like pre-Trump, you know. This was like Sarah Palin, you know, honey, they in the backyards tossing up hammers to knock a nail into a wooden stump. Like, that's the kind of like college and first job experience I had. And so when I left that space, because it also felt like something was getting closer and closer to me. Like, I was going to be outed, like something was going to happen. I also just got like really weird messages sometimes. Like one time I got a guy saying, "I know your secret. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone." But it's like, okay, but why are you telling me you have this information? You know, like, it's like that kind of weirdness. So that was happening while the movement for Black Lives was really starting to pop off.
Right.
And I wrote the things that I wanted to write, but I had to write them as if they didn't implicate me, you know?
Right.
Especially the LGBTQ issues stuff. So, I mean, I couldn't even say I was a feminist in that space without getting hate mail. So that, long story short, so that was my first job experience. And then I started working at How Stuff Works, which was a media company, but it was in Atlanta based, and it wasn't really conservative, but the work that they were doing wasn't connected to any of the movement stuff that I was starting to be more and more interested in and see myself in. And I just remember there was the death of Leila Alcorn. There was the death of it was like another Black cis man at the hands of police. Don't even remember who, because there was so many during that time period. And I went to work each of those days, and it was just business as usual. And I was like, I cannot be in spaces where y'all get to operate as if this doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started doing more work with community. Tony Michelle Williams was leading this intern program at Snapco. And so I went in as an intern. Like, while I had my day job, I would get off and then go be an intern at Snapco. And that kind of brought me more fully into movement.
Was that when I met you? Were you doing that when I met you?
At Insight, right? Did we meet at Insight?
We met at Trans FitCon.
Oh, no. Actually, maybe, yeah.
I think so.
Actually, yeah. That was what, like 2015?
Yeah,
2014, 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually.
Because it was you and Mickey B. Y'all had we were doing TransFitCon, which was a bodybuilding competition for trans men that Neo founded, and I was a part of the organizing that particular year. And we had we were doing a fashion show, and the models didn't show up, and you and Mickey said, we'll do it. Yeah, they said, y'all said, okay. That's how I met both of y'all. And
right, because you were hosting.
Yeah.
Yo, okay, I'm remembering this now.
Yeah, I was hosting it, but I also was the organizer too. So we
probably thought we were some babies. Did we?
I was the babies. Y'all were the babies, but y'all came in clutch as fuck, because we were like, we did not have no more bottles. Only a few of them came, And y'all was like, oh, we can do it. And it was like, oh, yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. So in regards to your writing, so you always have been, to me, a person, when I read your writing, I will read articles that you were featured in, like on Huffington Post and, BuzzFeed and, for Essence. Like when I read your writing, you're always speaking, to me, truth to power. You always are shining light on erased voices and perspectives all the time. How has your passion for writing matured?
My passion for writing, how has it matured?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I think it's always an evolution. Because I think as you write more, you read more. As you read more, you write more, hopefully. And I just feel like I have a larger library of references now. Which, this is like a portion of my books, but it's like there's so much to pull from. And I think as Black trans folks, like that's part of the beauty of our experience, right? It's like I feel like I'm in the lineage of the Ida B. Wells, right? Particularly with the Trans Obituaries Project. I feel like I'm in the lineage of like an Angela Davis and her critiques around so many of these systems, including capitalism. I feel like I'm in the lineage of the Barbara Smiths and the Barbara Ransbys, and but also I think what's also beautiful is looking at a lineage that isn't necessarily scholarly or literary.
Absolutely.
So like being in the lineage of Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, all the way back to like Mary Jones and Frances Thompson and so many folks, Crystal LaBeija, also means that I approach these texts in a different way with a different lens.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned that you were from, I'm going to something a little lighter. You just mentioned that you were from Georgia, so you are a Southern belle.
I am. It comes out sometimes.
Sometimes. And clearly you are a beautiful woman. So tell me this. Sure. Has your newfound ability opened up more dating opportunities?
Ability in terms of
newfound visibility.
Not really. Honestly, no. And I think it's like interesting because it's like having all the issues that I think like Black cis women who are considered successful have, right? Where it's like, especially if you're interested in having a Black man or masculine partner, it's like there's an intimidation factor being seen as successful or visible or whatever that we don't even get a chance to talk about, I think, as Black trans women.
No. That's why I'm bringing it up, because I think a lot of people would look at you and say, oh, she got it going on, which you do. But I'm thinking, like, I know somebody could look at it and be like, are there universal trans dating woes that are you still dealing with? Did it eliminate some shit? And basically you saying, nah, sis, nah.
Well, it's just, it's hard to say because there's so many things that are moving, right? So it's like, it's that piece of it, right? Of like the work that I do and my presence is intimidating. And I guess my like platform and visibility. But it's also like if you date, it's also different too, because like if you date me, particularly as a Black cishet man, like this is like extra, but it's like the world knows, right? Or like hella folks know, thousands of people will know, right? And so there's a certain commitment that you have to be coming at me with that is invested in Black trans liberation. I can't just have any old person right beside me.
Right.
I think the other thing too is I think even in like community, because I consider myself queer, even though I've mostly dated men and masculine folks, and I've dated trans men, but it's like, also I think in queer and trans community, it's like there's a different type of intimidation factor, because being a public figure in like queer and trans community, it's like, oh, you're the Raquel Willis. Like, it's like, that's not sexy to me. Like,
right.
I want you to know my power and my brilliance and my work, but like, it's like a different type of dehumanizing. You know, it's almost like that like superwoman trope or whatever, where it's like you're dehumanized in the sense of like them feeling like they'll never be worthy for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's hard to like articulate those things. I think
you know who articulated it beautifully? Tyra Banks.
Okay.
There was an interview that she had where she was like, she would go on dates with dudes, and she was like, I know the type of nigga that this is, because he would always say, you're Tyra Banks. It wouldn't be Tyra, just a regular. He would always address her as first and last name, because that meant something to him. And she was like, it triggers in her brain, like her radar go off, that this dude is not dating Tyra. He's trying to date the Tyra Banks. He's not seeing me as a fully actualized human. He's seeing whoever that thing in his mind is, that is Tyra Banks. And so, yeah, I think I totally get that. I think I don't experience it on your level, I don't think, but I have experienced it on some level, because, you know, I do have a name for myself too, and they'll come at me on some weird shit, and I'm like, oh.
It's like I need to bow down. It's like,
yeah,
be hot to me, like shit. I need like to be approached like the human that I am. You know, a queen is still a human,
right?
You know, so like, you ain't gotta do all that extra stuff, and I that bothers me a lot. And I also, you know, the other thing too is like, yeah, I mean, look, you know, if I wanted to jump off like most any other trans woman or trans feminine person, like, sure, but I've done that. You know, I've had that experience, you know, and
right.
that doesn't actually leave me feeling fulfilled.
Right.
So I don't even put as much energy into that type of experience anymore.
Are you boycotting DL men?
Am I boycotting DL men? I feel like I was already doing that in a sense, but yeah, I did see some of the critiques of the boycott DL men, like the origins of the campaign, like who started it. I get it.
Yeah. I know for me in dating, also I get the I'm too woke for people. Like, I'm too, especially in regards to, you know, patriarchy and shit like that. Like, it's hard to find men who are invested in us being equal in a relationship. It's hard to find men who, you know, who are not really invested in that kind of ownership and possession and, you know, that kind of thing. Who I can't find men. Back in the day when I was in my 20s and I was looking for that Susie homemaker kind of relationship, it worked. But I feel like, housewife, it would have worked. But now that I'm well read and I've, you know, evolved, I think it took me out of a bracket for people. Do you feel that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not interested in being with anyone who makes me feel guilty for thinking too much.
At all.
Period. So, look, so that just tells me you ain't thinking enough. And bye. Like, I don't have the energy for that BS anymore. And I I agree so much. You know, it's almost like, especially being a Black trans woman, with a certain, I think, amount of, or at least feeling like you have a certain amount of awareness. It often feels like you're decades removed from, if not centuries removed from, a world that could even like produce the type of partner that's worthy of you.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's like the world we're creating. In a way,
the world we're creating is going to benefit the girls coming up, but we're not going to be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor.
We got to make some sacrifices.
Yeah.
I don't say that to discount like anybody's experience. I think, you know, I have nothing but love and kudos for the girls who have figured it out, found the ones that work for them.
Yeah.
And I have a little hope, but I'm not like wasting sleep over it right now. You know, I'm loving my solitude. I'm loving kicking somebody out. I'm loving my own space, my own bed.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm at now. I'm enjoying, like you said, I'm enjoying my own space, and I'm enjoying the power of, when I want the comforts of a man, I can have it. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to deal with the extra stuff. And if you're not stepping up in the way that I want you to step up, back in the day, I thought that it was validating. I thought that having a man was a part of womanhood. It was a part that you needed if you wanted to be validated as a woman, because that's what the women in my family were. They had husbands. They had men that they were with for years, and blah, blah, blah. So I thought that was a part. Somebody choosing you was a part of your validation of your womanhood. And so I've gotten to the point where it is no longer a part of the validation, and I enjoy the freedom from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with all that said, honey, if you find and you want to holler, honey, I might answer.
All right. Well, I think that we have talked about so much, and I so appreciate you being on the show. Can you tell them where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can definitely find my work at raquelwillis.com, RAQUELWILLIS. I'm on all platforms, Twitter, Facebook, IG as Raquel Willis. And if you want to find out more about the Miss Foundation, you can check out forwomen.org, FORWOMEN.org.
And I will put all the links down in the bottom so you can check her out and check out the work that she has. She has always been generous with her platform. She is always innovating and creating something new. So she's definitely a thought leader in our community that I am so proud to know. I am proud to see your glow up, because I met you as a baby. And so just to see your glow up and grow into the woman that you have become, it is so beautiful to me, and I'm so proud of you. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. And I'm so proud of you holding it down all the time. I'm glad I got to get on Marshall's plate. Yeah. Next time I got to talk to the full crew.
Right. We definitely tried, but they so busy and working and doing their OnlyFans.
Okay, well, I ain't mad at it.
You know, and it's beneficial, so they do their thing. Well, all right, y'all. Thank y'all for listening. And check out the links in the bottom.